I'm Aida Rigodaro, and on today's episode, I welcome back Nadia Akpinar to discuss the recent avalanche of gallery closures, the surprise winner of the Turner Prize, the splendor of the Venice Biennale, Art Basel Paris, and the best shows of the year, not to mention our art market predictions for 2025. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe for more art stories. Nadia, thank you so much for coming onto the channel again. It's always so wonderful to have you. So let's start with the bad news.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be back. So yes, unfortunately, there has been a bit more bad news this year off the back of a very contracted market in 2023. 2024 proved to be sort of moving in the same direction, and there were a lot of gallery closures over the last sort of 2 years which have taken place. So looking at London, you had Simon Lee, Fold Gallery. You also had Gagosian, who had closed their Britannia space, which was quite significant. LA as well had seen several closures. Stefan Sinkovits had 4 spaces, which he's now consolidated down into one private campus in Pasadena. Nino Maya Gallery, Praz de la Valade, which had 2 spaces, one in Los Angeles and one also in Paris. And Marlborough Gallery, which was also had a foothold in London, New York, Madrid, Barcelona, and they've been in business for 78 years.
Yeah, they're such an old gallery.
They really are, 100%. So I think that sent quite a few shockwaves when the news of that came out, because they've been around for so long. And then you also have, in New York, Mitchell, Innes and Nash, who have actually announced that they're going to be transitioning into a more project-based art advisory. So I think that this is just to name a few. There have been many more than the names I've listed, but it can go on. And this is just to sort of make the overall point that gallery closures are happening more and more frequently. And it is because of the things we discussed in our last video, such as the rising costs, the inflation rates having gone up, and a sort of overall contraction in the market after the boom which happened during COVID. So it's sad to see, but it'll be interesting to see which galleries continue to survive in the current market and how businesses continue to adapt given the change in circumstances.
Okay, so that's sobering news, though.
Yes.
In terms of galleries, how about the trend in auction houses? Is that?
So the auction houses, Sotheby's in particular, has a quite difficult time. Their core earnings were down 88% this year, which was a huge, massive drop. And I know that their owner, Patrick Drahi, has a ton of debt, and he's the majority stakeholder in Sotheby's. So I think that it's been a really challenging year for them. And I do think auction sales in general have, their overall sales totals and what they're able to sell has definitely gone down. Just looking at Q4 and looking at the New York sales that happened in November, looking at Sotheby's, they had a joint single owner sale of Civil Miller, who was a beauty mogul. They were sort of selling off a number of works from her private collection. And they also had their modern art sale, and the total for that was $268 million, which was roughly 42% less than the previous year. Christie's actually did fairly well with their single owner sale of Nika Ertegun, who was an interior designer, socialite, and also married to the music mogul and co-founder of Atlantic Records, Ahmet Ertegun. And that joint sale between the single owner sale and the modern sale grossed $410 million. So, significantly more than Sotheby's. They also set the record for the most expensive artwork sold in 2024, for the Magritte work, which sold for $121 million. And there were several surrealist works which came to market because this year was the 100th year anniversary of the movement. So you had about 3 Magritte works which did very well at Christie's, and you also had a couple of female surrealist artists who sold at Sotheby's, such as Leonora Carrington and Leonore Feeney. So that was interesting to see. And then obviously Sotheby's New and Now were responsible for the sale of the Mauricio Cattelan comedian piece, yes. the notorious banana work, which sold for $6.2 million to a crypto investor. And, the work itself is very tongue-in-cheek, and it's been in the press so much. I think whoever was going to buy the work knew that they were sort of going to be in the headlines as a result. So yes, Overall, it's been a much slower year, a softer year. Just to also give you another example, in June, Christie's decided to pull their London auctions. So typically speaking, there'll be a modern and contemporary art sales that happen in June in London, and they decided to pull their auction altogether. And Sotheby's did go ahead with their auction, but it grossed about 55% less than the previous year. So overall, auction sales are also down. I think there are a few art fairs, which I know you're going to discuss as well, which showed some glimmer of hopes in the market that not all has been lost. But I think overall, the contraction continued.
Yeah. So sort of sobering news on in that respect, but
Yes.
definitely some of the fairs I think were really exciting. And let's start with the Venice Biennale, which I don't know if you can call it a fair, but that was definitely sort of my highlight of the year. One of the things I particularly loved about it, apart from just the splendor of being in Venice,
Yes.
was the fact that it seemed to shine a light on geographies that haven't been represented at the fair before, or at least not to that extent. So I particularly enjoyed the Nigerian pavilion. Mm-hmm. It was only the second time in the history of the Venice Biennale that Nigeria had a pavilion, and the works were great. I loved the works that spoke to me, I guess, were those that were actually moving away from what I feel is now quite a saturated arena of identity politics, and they were moving away from that and focusing on the natural landscape, and there was some really exciting works around that theme. And then Venice Biennale is absolutely ginormous; it's huge. It would take 10 trips to really get around the whole Biennale. But I went there with a group of collectors, and unanimously everybody thought that the French pavilion was fantastic.
Amazing.
Particularly the work of I believe he's French, Caribbean, an artist called Julien Croiset. And his works were super. So I think they were my highlights of the Venice Biennale.
That's wonderful. And then we had the pleasure of going to Frieze together, which was so much, it was wonderful, fun as always, to go together. I think Frieze, one of the main things a lot of people picked up on was that the format had sort of shifted this year. So the emerging galleries were really placed at the fore of the fair, I should say. And so upon entry, instead of seeing Gagosian and all of the sort of major hitters, you were actually confronted with the smaller, more emerging galleries. And what that did was it not only kind of democratized the fair and enabled these smaller, more emerging galleries to get more exposure as well as their artists, but it also enabled the fair to sort of get back to their original DNA, which was really, known for showing more experimental avant-garde art. From the London-based scene. So I think that was a sort of refreshing change. Some of the booths that I really loved were the ones that also sort of paid tribute to some of the institutional shows that had taken place in London earlier on in the year. So David Werner had that incredible Rose Wiley work, which I was just so infatuated with. And I had seen that work earlier on in the year at the Royal Academy Summer Exhibition. And then there was also a few works by Chris Ofili, and he has this incredible commission that's on at the Tate Britain titled Requiem. And so that was amazing to have that sort of that tie-in on the booth. And there were also works by Barbara Kruger, and she had her show at the Serpentine. And then White Cube, for example, had these incredible editions that were made of Tracy Emin's bronze doors that were at the National Portrait Gallery. So I really enjoyed those sort of references to the institutional shows that had taken place earlier on in the year. And I think Goodman Gallery also had an amazing booth. They had works by Yinka Shonobare and Ellen Tsui and Leonardo Drew, all of whom I absolutely love. So there were some great presentations this year.
So Frieze, I completely agree that the new layout was a game changer. And then the other big fair that I went to was Art Basel.
Paris.
Art Basel Paris,
which people say overshadowed Frieze, and that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it overshadowed Frieze or if it was a really nice successor to Frieze in terms of first, there was Frieze, and then the week after was Art Basel. And before you even get into the art, what struck me was the feeling of optimism there. It was a beautiful fair in this outstanding building. It was very slick. It was stunning to be there, and there was a real sense of positivity and optimism.
Amazing.
And following the sobering news of sort of the auction results and the gallery closures, people were there to buy, and there were some really robust sales. So it kind of felt that maybe refreshing the location a little bit, refreshing the format, gave everybody a bit of a kick up there. Sort of, it was just
the boost that everyone needed,
reinvigorated everybody. So it was really exciting to be there.
Yeah.
And in terms of the art, there were a number of standout booths. I loved Goodman Gallery. They represent a number of artists that I collect or would love to collect. I mean, Ellen Natsby, he continues to just produce really impactful work.
I agree.
So, yeah, I think that was probably my highlight of Art Basel, Patty.
That's wonderful. In terms of your favourite shows, there were some actually amazing shows this year, which I feel so lucky to have been in the same city as, because they're the kind of shows that if I was living somewhere else, I'd think, I really want to go see that. So I felt so lucky that I was able to, visit so many of them. My favourite shows, one of them was it started off at the beginning of the year. So it was Barbara Kruger's solo exhibition at the Serpentine. I absolutely loved that exhibition. With Barbara Kruger, it's never really, you're not admiring the painterly quality or the brushstrokes. Her work is appropriated imagery with superimposed text in sans serif, which has kind of become her signature typeface, which she has become known for using. But what I find really interesting about her work is it's very confronting. And I think a lot of the messages that it shares are like time bombs that are detonating, which is, to use the language of a journalistic piece which I read that was reviewing her exhibition. But basically what I love about it is, she's really holding up a mirror to society. So a lot of the language that she uses, it feels incredibly timely and incredibly relevant to what is happening today. Your Body is a Battleground, that's one of her most iconic works that was featured at the exhibition. And I feel like in the wake of the Roe v. Wade overturning in the US, that work has taken on a whole new meaning. It was also a show that was happening at the beginning of the year, and it was in anticipation of Trump potentially being re-elected. So a lot of the topics that she touched on felt quite meaningful and relevant to that as well. One of the other pieces that she has, I shop, therefore I am. And I think that really alludes to our very consumer and capitalist driven society. My people are better than your people. The idea that we've become increasingly divided, especially when you look at what's happening around the world today. So I did feel and do feel that her work is powerful and that it has that effect where it really makes you think a little bit deeper and a little bit harder about how we act and what it is that's really happening around the world today. So I particularly loved that show, and it really, really stuck with me. Another exhibition which I really loved was Unravel, which was at the Barbican, and that was really paying homage to a lot of the fiber artists. It was doing storytelling of fiber art as a medium, and I do think that fiber art has become increasingly part of the mainstream art market and something that's kind of really gained an appreciation over the last few years. I particularly love a lot of fiber artists' work. I know that in recent years you've had, Faith Ringgold at the New Museum in New York, you've had Bisa Butler at the Institute of Chicago, and then obviously Unravel was quite a major exhibition, and it showed incredible works by Faith Ringgold, Shabalala Self, Tracy Emin, Yinka Shonibare. So there were some really meaningful examples of household name artists. It felt like it was due to have this major exhibition that was focused on fiber art as a medium. And then the final exhibition, which I wanted to talk about, was Monet at the Courtauld. That was, opened more recently, and I went to go see that just in the last few weeks. And that was a really beautiful, quite intimate exhibition that was really just took 2 rooms within the Courtauld. One of the things that was so special about it was that, it's about 21 works in the show, and 18 of those works were originally shown 120 years ago at Monet's art dealer's gallery in Paris in an exhibition. So the curator managed to trace those 18 works and then add an additional 3 to create an overview of his time in London. And that felt incredibly special. And I think, Monet is an exquisite painter, and it's incredible to see how he's able to capture such subtle changes in light and fog and, reproduce a painting which feels almost entirely different, even though it's looking at the exact same cityscape. So that was a beautiful exhibition. It also felt quite pertinent, the fact that he was said to have painted a lot of the paintings at the Savoy Hotel, which is just around the corner from the Courtauld, and on the Thames. And obviously the Courtauld is very close to the river. So that felt quite meaningful and significant as well. And it was just an absolutely beautiful painterly show. So I really enjoyed that as well.
Oh, those are three incredible choices.
Thank you. Tell me more about yours.
I'll tell you about, they're not my favorite necessarily, but they're the shows I'm still thinking about.
Yes.
So I'll start with the Turner Prize. And
Yes.
I've been thinking about that because they've just announced the winner.
Okay.
And I know a lot of people were a little bit surprised by the winner. Jasleen Kaur, I think, or Kaur, I hope I'm pronouncing it properly.
Yes.
He was potentially less well known than some of the other nominees. And at 38, she was the youngest of the nominees.
Wow.
I'm really excited to see sort of where her career will now go,
Yes.
because as you know, the Turner Prize is such a launch pad for artistic careers.
Absolutely.
And her work was really interesting. The judges said they liked the way that she, you repurposed everyday objects in a really unexpected and creative way. And a lot of it spoke to her Scottish Sikh heritage. So I thought that was a fascinating show, the Turner Prize. And the second show was the 80s Photographing Britain.
Yes.
I was a little bit disappointed by that. So that's what I've been thinking about, because despite the fact there were some amazing photographers featured, I felt that it didn't show the whole picture. It missed a lot of the exuberance, the color, the optimism.
Yes.
Even the sort of the glamour and the decadence,
Yeah.
that's what you think of as well when you think of the 80s. So
Totally.
I would have liked
it a bit disappointing as well.
Did you? Yeah. I would have liked it to be a bit more rounded. But it was interesting, and I'm thinking about it. I'm still thinking about it.
Yeah, definitely.
The third one was the one that got away. I haven't yet seen the Van Gogh, and I'm desperate to see it. So I will see it before it closes in January. In January, exactly. Because I know it's the most significant show he's had in forever in the UK, and I will pop some pictures up. I know you saw it, so that would probably be my number 3.
I think you'll definitely love it. It's an amazing show, and I know the reviews have been rave reviews all round. So I think that's definitely something you can save for the new year and look forward to.
Lastly, shall we look to 2025?
Yes.
So, what do you think we'll be looking at in 2025 in the art world?
So I think there's going to be more of a sort of adaptation in terms of existing business models that are out there, especially for perhaps former gallery owners or galleries who are currently struggling and who feel that they're not able to survive with the mounting costs of whether it's rent or shipping or the cost of art fairs, etc., but who still want to be in that space. So I think it's going to be interesting to see potentially a hybrid business model that starts to emerge. Just like I mentioned earlier, Mitchell, Innes and Nash are now launching a more project-based art advisory. So I'll be curious to see how those different sort of new and upcoming business models flesh out. And
so when you say hybrid, sort of advisory stroke gallery kind of?
Yes, but more of a project-based. Okay. So meaning that they're not paying rent for the whole year, but they're perhaps doing maybe pop-up shows, or they're sort of, they are deviating from the original model in terms of how it currently plays out, where you have a space the entire year round and you have minimum 6 exhibitions a year, normally more, but where there's a fixed blueprint for how things play out. And I'd be interesting to see how different players start to tinker with that and how they start to make it more sustainable for themselves as a business model. So I think we're going to see a little bit more of that, of a kind of shift in terms of how people are doing business for those who are unable to survive in the current climate. And I think the other thing which we'll potentially see, as we saw with Frieze, the layout was turned around. And I think that was not only an act to kind of bring them closer to their original DNA, because I think the 20th year anniversary, which was last year, they were sort of criticized for the fair feeling too safe. So they're, by placing the emerging galleries at the center of the fair or at the front of the fair, I think that was their attempt at sort of returning a bit back more to their roots of what they became known for. But at the same time, there was another gesture made that was in Art Basel at Miami Beach this December, whereby they introduced flexible pricing and sizing options for their main section, the gallery section. And so it'll be interesting to see potentially how other art fairs continue to show awareness and sensitivity to the fact that, especially for their smaller players, this is a really difficult climate to exist in, and that they need to be creating more and more space and more opportunity for younger and more emerging galleries to partake. Art Basel Miami Beach actually saw 34 newcomers come to their edition this year, and that was all because of the fact that this new flexible pricing was more inclusive, and it meant that more people could partake. So I think that just seeing the kind of overall industry and the market adapt to the current climate, and seeing, you know, what kind of either new business models they come up with, or what kind of ways they can support galleries within the current infrastructure will be really interesting. And with Sotheby's, I think it sounds a bit harsh, but I think unless there's a, you know, change in ownership, especially at a majority stakeholder level, it's possible that they close. I've been reading that there have been a huge number of layoffs in a lot of their different headquarters. So, you know, maybe it seems unlikely that they would close, but they're definitely struggling at the moment.
I hope it won't come to that.
I hope it won't come to that. I know it's been a really difficult year for them, and I really, really hope that they can get out of it. It's just at a very top level, I know that there are a lot of issues that they're facing, and so it'll require a huge shift in order to get them out of the current situation that they're in. So we shall see how that plays out.
We shall see.
I'm sure Christie's will be delighted.
Well, I'm sure there'll be lots of surprises as well in 2025.
Yes.
And we will be here documenting them all.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for watching. And as always, if you do enjoy this content, it'd be so wonderful if you could like and subscribe. Thank you so much, Nadia.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.